to the annual Henry S. Jennings Jr. Visiting Lectureship. There is no commercial support for today's program. The speaker and planners have disclosed no relevant financial relationships with any commercial interests. If you have a question for the presenter, please hold until the Q&A segment at the end of the talk. And if you're attending virtually and have a question, please enter it into the Q&A section. Also, a link to the event survey will be shared with you at the end of the program. I would like to introduce Dr. John Dalzell, Vice President of Medical Education and the Designated Institutional Officer for Northeast Georgia Medical Center.
Thanks a lot for coming. We're excited to have you here. My name is John Dalzell, as you just heard from Jennifer. I'm so excited to welcome you to this year's Jennings Lecture. On behalf of all of our colleagues in medical education, I just want to thank you for our 6th annual Henry S. Jennings Visiting Lectureship in Medical Humanities. Whether you're here in the room, and I appreciate all of you who are, or if you're online, thanks for your support and your interest in this incredible series that we've had over the last several years. I want to start out by saying that we wouldn't be able to have this lectureship if it wasn't for the signature gift that the Jennings family has made to the Northeast Georgia Health System Foundation. So I'd like to recognize the Jennings family. I believe that Dr. Jennings is, one of the Dr. Jennings is online. And so I want to thank you, Hank, for being there for us. And I'd like to thank the Jennings family that's here. Betsy, thank you so much for all the support that you've had for this program. This was really their vision to have a lectureship in humanities, and based on the really incredible legacy that their father left us here at Northeast Georgia. So make sure you look at the information on the back that talks about Dr. Jennings and all that he did for us here. So let's give them a round of applause. I'd also like to thank our board members for being here and supporting us to do this work. You know, it's about 10 years ago that our board committed to doing graduate medical education, and all of you as residents and all of us as members of the health system are the beneficiaries of that. So I want to thank the board for their continued support. So tonight, I am very excited to welcome our speaker, Dr. Ira Bedzow. He's the Executive Director of Emory University's Emory Purpose Project. I want to tell you a little bit about him. I got the opportunity with some of our folks to talk to him for an hour before we started this session, and I think you're going to be really excited to hear what he has to say. Dr. Bedzow is the Executive Director of Emory University's Purpose Project, a signature element of Emory's Student Flourishing Initiative. He's an associate professor in the Department of Medicine, a core faculty in Emory's Center for Ethics, a senior fellow in the Center for Study of Law and Religion, and the unit head of the International Chair in Bioethics at Emory University. That's a lot of stuff, keeping him busy, but he took some time to come visit us. His interests relate to understanding the ethical implications of biotechnology and healthcare policy, as well as how organizations can create an ethical culture through values-driven leadership. Dr. Bedzow is a senior scholar of the Aspen Center for Social Values, co-director of the Ferenc Institute for Ethics, Human Rights, and the Holocaust, and a regular contributor in Forbes. He's an Orthodox rabbi. Tonight, Dr. Bedzow is going to present Integrating Purpose into Professional Identity. Please help me welcome Dr. Bedzow to the podium for this very timely presentation.
Thanks, Hon. Well, with that introduction, my time is up, and I'll take questions. So first off, a couple of things. One, I really love a good evening because it lets me know what I'm working with in terms of excitement and preparation. Also, even if you're all holding your questions until the end, I may still ask you questions. So if I do ask, I would love for you to answer them. And if you don't answer them, you can at least just give me as well as a good evening as you gave before. So just a quick gut check before I get started. How many of you, whether you're residents or program directors and so forth, hear often or use the term often, use purpose in your daily conversations or your professional work or so forth? I got 2 here, so okay. How many use the term or hear the term professional identity often? 1, 2. Okay, great. This is going to be fun. All right, let me go through a couple of my session objectives, and then we'll get this ball rolling. So hopefully, I want to say no promises, but I feel like this is written down, so it's a promise. By the end of the session, participants, you guys, will be able to reflect on personal values and how they inform professional identity and decision making, which now that I know that we don't hear the term professional identity that often, I might have to define it. Number 2, identify strategies that align purpose and meaning with your roles as healthcare professionals. 3, discuss how integrating purpose into professional identity can improve resilience and ethical practice in challenging situations. And apply practical tools to foster a sense of fulfillment and authenticity in your professional life. And so this is a lot for an hour. So I'm gonna draw it back a little bit and say what I really hope that we can do is reflect on personal values, identify strategies, discuss maybe during question and answer. With regards to applying practical tools, I'm going to leave that for homework. So I wasn't sure if you guys were here for homework or just for the great dinner, but now you got both. Let me give you my vantage point in terms of where I'm coming from, why this matters to me, and how I teach about both purpose and professional identity formation. So one of my earlier jobs, I ran a biomedical ethics and humanities program at a medical school. And one of the first things that I was tasked with was turning the ethics curriculum from a content-based curriculum into a competency-based curriculum. Basically what that meant was, instead of simply just teaching principalism, do you guys know what principalism is? Please say yes. Okay, one person. You'll follow me. Learning simply what patient autonomy might be and what respecting that is, what are the factors of informed consent, what is pediatric consent, and so forth. Instead of learning simply what those concepts are, how can we teach not only how to practice them or how to do them in practice, but more importantly, how can we bring our values, bring our professional expectations, bring our ethical goals and our ethical decision-making into our everyday lives. And when I mean our everyday lives is in terms of when you walk into the door, speak to a patient, build that rapport, take patient histories, understand diagnoses, understand how to think about different treatment alternatives. When you have conflicts with your colleagues or with your I don't know, let's say others in interprofessional collaboration, you know how to speak, knowing what your scope of practice is, what their scope of practice is, how to speak in a way that allows for collaboration as opposed to competition or conflict. How do we do that? So one of the things that I realized very quickly was we're very good at teaching, hopefully learning, how to be aware of ethical tensions and how to potentially analyze or deliberate ethical tensions. But when we come to a resolution of what to do, we have a lot of trouble then figuring out how to accomplish that in a way that's successful. And when I mean successful, I mean not self-sacrificial, and in a way that speaks to who we are and what we care about. So when I was thinking about ethics competency and ethics curriculum, and by the way, you'll see how this gets into professionalism competency and professionalism curriculum, I really wanted to think about not only what are the concepts and what are the expectations to have for professionals, but how can people really act on them, given who they are, where they're coming from, what their limitations are, both personally and organizationally, and what their capabilities are, both personally and organizationally. So as I was thinking about professional identity formation from an ethics perspective, and just so you know, my academic background is in virtue ethics, which really is about character development, both in terms of character development as an individual and character development as an individual situated within a society or as an organization. So as I was thinking about ethics and professionalism curriculum, I then ended up moving to Emory and running something called the Emory Purpose Project. So what the Emory Purpose Project is it's a university-wide, as we heard in my tremendously long bio, it's a university-wide initiative that tries to think about how to have students learn to be more purpose-oriented in their lives. Now, purpose is a really difficult term, and we're going to define it, or I'll define what I mean by purpose later. But oftentimes when people think about purpose, they're like, ooh, that seems like a lot, either in terms of thinking about what the world has in store for them, or the highest bar that they have in store for themselves. And they think about this idea of purpose as being this one thing that if I don't get right, then I miss the opportunity to be who I'm supposed to be. Right? That's too much. It doesn't work. It's not accurate in reality. And it creates a sense of overwhelm as opposed to a sense of empowerment. So what we think about are, what are the capabilities or what are the skills that people can develop to be more purposeful and develop a purpose mindset. And what I mean by a purpose mindset is thinking about, what are you doing? Who do you want to be? How do you create the opportunities to become that person? And what do you do in order to become that person you want to be? If you notice, that sounds a lot like professional identity formation. Right? But here we're doing it across. So we do it in undergrads, we do it in graduate schools, we do it in professional schools in terms of medical schools, School of Public Health, Candler School of Theology, as well as the law school. And the way we do it is we integrate these competency-oriented pedagogy into curriculum, reinforced by extracurricular activities, so people see these not as classroom skills, but as life skills. And then the most important of all is we recognize there's something called a hidden curriculum. Have you guys ever heard of a hidden curriculum? It's the one that you're tested on? No, okay. A hidden curriculum basically, and I love this so much, is not what we teach you by virtue of telling you, but what we teach you by virtue of doing things which you then see, oh, that's how it's really supposed to be done. Right? So the hidden curriculum really is aligned with the culture of an organization or the culture of a campus or a school. So we do a lot of work with faculty and staff in terms of thinking about how people can live and act and work according to their values and with their own purpose mindset. So we're not just simply teaching that it's important, we're showing that it's important and showing that it's possible. So where I'm coming from is in these two different areas of thinking about the how, not simply the what or the should. And when we think about the how, that how is not simply in terms of behavior, but also in terms of, how do I think about myself? How do I think about myself in community or on a team or in an organization? And how do I impact the organization or myself towards the goals or the intentions that I aspire to have? You guys with me so far? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, now let's talk about professionalism. So before we get into definitions of professionalism, what does it mean for professionalism as a competency, I found this story from the field in this clinical learning environment review, looking at professionalism, and it was a very good report, meaning everyone apparently is doing really, really well in terms of professionalism, but we had this story as the story that the authors or the task force chose as looking at what professionalism is in a clinical environment. So let me read it real quick and ask you a couple of questions. So in a group discussion during one of the CLER visits, a resident mentioned that his attending physician asked him to code as many diagnoses and comorbidities as possible for each patient in order to maximize the billing claims. The resident went on to note that on occasion, only on occasion, the attending physician would ask him to add a diagnosis that the resident felt was not indicated. The resident said that his attending physician was not pleased when he questioned him about this documentation practice. He noted that the attending physician went on to state that the hospital's billing department viewed this as appropriate, that this practice was common, and told him not to be concerned. The resident said that when he mentioned this to his senior resident, he was told not to do any coding that made him uncomfortable. Have you guys ever seen something like this before? Not here, obviously, but have you ever heard about this or seen this as a case for your professionalism tests? Does this sound familiar to you? Raise your hand if it sounds familiar. What's your reaction to this? I know, really open-ended question. Anyone want to take a stab on what their reaction is? The one thing that you should know best of all is yourself. So even if it's open-ended, you can answer what your reaction is. Would you like me to answer that question? I'll model. Let's do this. I'm going to model this. So my reaction to this was frustration, right? Because here I am teaching professionalism, or I want to live in a way that speaks to professionalism or develop a professional identity, and I still don't know what to do here, right? Meaning, when the senior resident says, let's say I'm the resident, not to do anything that made me uncomfortable, is that an out? Meaning, like the resident said, look, I said don't do anything that makes you uncomfortable. Like, I'm good. Like, you should act professionally, right? When the attending says, and I love this because there's like sometimes the attending doth protest too much. If he says that, where does he go? That this is, the billing department reviews this as appropriate, that the practice was common, and not to be concerned, why 3 things? Why 3? Right? What do the 3 things say to us? Well, if the billing department says that it's appropriate, it means that this isn't his personal decision. Someone from higher up, somewhere, says like this is okay. Like we use appropriate as a real term, right? Like, have you ever used the term for futility medically inappropriate? Are we taught to use that term? Sometimes we don't want to use it anymore because appropriate has that connotation of you shouldn't have even asked, right? Meaning, so if something is appropriate, we're saying like this is good, right? Not only that, what does he say next? The practice is common, right? Meaning everybody's doing it. What are you having a problem for, right? And then if that doesn't work, don't be concerned. Well, why shouldn't I be concerned? What, because you're going to take the rap for it? Or I shouldn't be concerned because I'm not going to get caught doing it? Or don't be concerned as in you're telling me to be quiet, right? So again, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to be and what is professional here, I'm really nervous because we all know what the right thing to do is. But do we also recognize how hard the right thing to do is here? Raise your hand if you recognize how hard the right thing to do is. All right? Yeah, it's hard. So when we think about competencies, what we need to think about is not simply giving you the ability to make the decisions that you know you should make. And I don't want to say should. Make the decisions that you want to make to speak to your goals and values. We also want to think about the organizational hidden curriculum of what is the attending here teaching you about what you're learning about professionalism versus what you should be learning in real life about professionalism, right? And if we're recognizing this, then as educators, how do we think about teaching professionalism at odds with the organization? So I'm sure you've all done so much reading in character formation and virtue theory, but there's these 2 theories of like how people think about becoming empowered or disempowered in terms of how they act. So there's the Lawrence Kohlberg theory where we basically develop through stages of moral ability, and eventually, through enough experience, we're able to do not only the right thing and the good thing, but also recognize when rules need to be rules are seen more as guidelines because of the context of a situation, right? That makes sense. I mean, we teach it as a competency. We teach it as a curriculum. What studies have shown, I mean, it's a little dated now, but I'll say them anyway because I don't know if they've changed, is if you take that Kohlberian account, medical students and residents actually drop down levels as they continue in their medical education, right? Like they come in knowing certain standards, and then they don't actually develop. They either comply with standards as opposed to seeing nuance, or they become more egoistic as opposed to complying with standards, right? So it doesn't work, right? Or there's challenges to be questioned. So then you have Jonathan Haidt's social intuitionist theory that says, no, that's not really how people make decisions. The way people make decisions is they look at what values are being expressed in the organization. Then they see what is the easiest way to act given what's being reinforced and so forth. And then they make that decision and then rationalize it morally or justify it morally after the fact, right? So in a good environment, people act well. In a bad environment, people act improperly. The problem with that is if you have a professionalism problem, the question, like the answer is change the environment. But how do you change an environment without the people inside the environment? Right? So I actually think both of those are like is a false dichotomy. They actually have to come together. Right? I think people are more empowered than we give them credit for. While at the same time, people are always going to be influenced by their environments, because in this example itself, it's just really hard when things are stacked against you. So let's think about how do we teach professionalism through purpose. And when I say purpose, I mean both individual purpose as well as organizational purpose in order to think about professionalism. So before we get there, this is the ACGME's, not exactly, but close enough, wording for professionalism as a competency. So professionalism requires residents or fellows to demonstrate a commitment to carrying out professional responsibilities. What's your immediate question there? Well, what are professional responsibilities, right? Adherence to ethical principles, right? Now, I'm not a relativist. I do think there are such things as ethical principles, right? But in the same respect is how do those ethical principles play out given the variability of a medical environment? And sensitivity to diverse patient populations, right? That one I understand, right? So then I actually broke them up to think about how we teach this. So residents and fellows are expected to demonstrate. Now, when you say demonstrate, it means that you are doing something behaviorally that we can see and then test or assess or see if you are following this, right? So responsiveness to patient needs that supersedes self-interest. We can all come up with examples for that. Here, I'll give you one now. Continuing to listen to a patient when you need to go to the bathroom. Right? Like, it makes sense. Respect for patient privacy and autonomy. Can you guys think of one? Don't go blabber about things that is confidential, right? Accountability to patients, society, and to the profession. To patients, we get society and professions a little bit more difficult, right? Just because, like, what does that actually mean? And what are the boundaries, right? Then, residents and fellows are expected to demonstrate compassion, integrity, and respect for others. What does that mean? So when you are being assessed for, and again, this is not just going to be a doom and gloom. We're going to get to a real positive here. But I'm trying to articulate what exactly the challenge is in order to then understand how we actually teach this in a way that this makes a lot of sense, right? So I want to forewarn, don't leave here thinking, professionalism. Like, professionalism is a very good thing, but we have to understand what it is such that it's a very good thing. Right? Compassion, integrity, and respect for others. Here, I'm going to give you an example for respect for others. Let's say I see someone walking down the street, and they're having trouble walking down the street. And I want to go over and help that person not only walk down the street, but help them cross the street at the crosswalk. Am I respecting them? Yes or no? Raise your hand if I'm respecting them. Okay. Now, let's say if I told you that my intention was because I was on a date with my future wife and I wanted to show my future wife what a great person I am and how I will take care of the family and be such a good husband to her. So I run over and use this person walking across the street in order to show that, like that I am that person. But like it could have been anyone and like I don't really care. Is that respecting a person? But the behavior is exactly the same, right? So which means when you think about respect, and we do this in professionalism all the time, we think about content, like do you know what to do? Behavior, are you doing it? And affect, like what's your motivation? What's your feeling for it? But if you realize affect is an internal thing, right? So when you think about the internal, when we assess the internal, like this idea of competency is not simply how are you behaving, but it's how are you seeing yourself, what are your motivations, and how does it feel to behave that way? So one of the things that we really need to start thinking about where professionalism is different from interprofessional collaboration. So interprofessional collaboration, I think this is a really good one because it's different than medical knowledge. It's simply just content and then acting it out. But it's like interpersonal, just like professionalism is. So in interprofessional collaboration, do you know what the sub-competencies are on that? like understanding people's scopes of practice, being able to speak in a way that is cooperative as opposed to conflict-laden, and understanding how to be able to work well as a team. I think those are like the three main ones, right? But if you notice, those don't speak to affect and motivation in the same way. Those are a lot more behavioral, right? And you can also see how you act in such a way that competency is actually easier to assess. But with professionalism, we're not simply asking you to behave well. What we're really asking you is to think about who you are and why you are doing the things that you're doing and how it speaks to you, right? So if you think about professionalism as a competency, views professionalism as a set of behaviors and attitudes that can be learned, assessed, and improved upon. Right? That doesn't sound bad, but it sounds, I'll say this, necessary but insufficient. Professionalism as an identity views professionalism as an intrinsic part of a physician's character and sense of self. So let's do another hand raising. How many of you want to see yourself as a professional physician because you just act well? How many of you want to see yourself as someone who upholds professionalism because it's who you are? Okay, so more than the people who just want to act well, right? Which is good. I'm happy about that. I feel like we're now on the trajectory up, which thank God, because if we were just staying down, it would have been depressing. So we need to think about a competency, but not simply in terms of what are the procedures you know how to do, but what are the character traits you're cultivating in yourself such that your behaviors reflect something internal as well. Can I give you one more challenge or one more thing that we need to consider? Or how many of you are just move on? Okay, I'm going to give it to you. We have to think about what professionalism is itself, because it's not simply just an individual affair. So I took this slide from my good friend Matt Winnia's talk on the short history and tenuous future of professionalism in medicine. I'm not going to go into why he thinks there's a tenuous future. I'm just going to go into this slide. If you want to ask me later, I will just refer you to him. So he looks at the etymology of professionalism, but I think when you break it down like this, something comes up here that we need to consider. So the root verb is professionalism is to profess, to speak out in public or to openly declare. Now, I'll take a line that I use in my leadership studies that speaks more to profess than anything else. So profess, just like being a leader, doesn't mean knowing how to speak well. It means having something worth saying and then knowing how to say it well. So when you profess something, it just doesn't mean you're the loudest person in the room. It means you have a sense of goals or values or ethos or intention that is worth having and worth professing. A profession is a group that does this, which means they have shared standards and values of things that are worth declaring openly, right? So therefore, a professional is either an individual member of that group, or acting professional means acting in conformance with that shared standard or those shared values. Now, just before we get into professionalism, this is one thing that we need to consider as we develop, right? Professional autonomy sometimes is seen as the autonomy of a professional to act in the way that speaks to what they need or what they want, right? Meaning there's patient autonomy and then there's professional autonomy, right? That's not originally how it was used, and being used that way becomes really difficult. Professional autonomy meant the autonomy of the profession to self-regulate as well as to set standards for what the good aspects of that profession is. Right? So the establishment of the AMA's Code of Ethics in 1847, one of the main drivers of that was to determine who would be in and out of the profession of medicine. Right? It allowed for a professional autonomy when in this case, because it's the American Medical Association, the United States said, you have the ability to set your own standards. Right? Now that we don't really have that anymore. I think the only profession that really has true professional autonomy today is the legal profession, just because they're involved in law. But if you notice that the medical profession has semi-autonomy, right? Like in some respects we have licensing, but we also have board accreditation, and we have a very strong voice, like it used to be, it's a little bit less now for other reasons, that the ethics of the medical profession was a state interest to be considered in legal cases, right? So the professional autonomy was, sure, you have autonomy as a professional when you are an individual who is conforming with the standards of the group, not just because you got your degree. So professionalism here, like any other ism, is a belief system that holds these groups united and organized to deliver these goods or deliver these goals and values, right? So professionalism establishes its standards of quality, and it ensures and supports adherence to those standards, right? Not by coercion, right? An ism is never by coercion. If it's a belief system, it means you believe that these things are right and good, right? So when we think about professionalism, one of the challenges that we're going to have is how do you bridge the individual profession gap? If we say that becoming part of this profession and becoming a professional means we have these standards and you have to comply to them, not only through your behaviors, but through your affect and beliefs, how are you guys going to respond? How are you going to respond? Are you like, yes, I'm looking for the coercion. I want to comply. Or you're like, no, what about me? How do I fit into this? Are you forming me, or am I growing into this? Like, where does the personal professional come together? Right? And I think this is really the crux of professionalism education, right? Meaning, like, there are standards and expectations that the profession has for you, right? And you can't throw those away. While at the same time, if the profession dismisses you and ignores who you are and who you will become as you're inculcated into this profession, then you're not going to stay. There's going to be burnout. There's going to be a lack of resilience. There's going to be, I don't even want to get into unionization, but there's like a ton of other consequences and responses that happen because you lose your voice, even when you have shared values, right? So when I think about professionalism, inculcating professional beliefs and values, there's two real main things that I want to recognize. The first is speaking your values consists of a set of skills to develop, right? Meaning the capacity for professional behavior is like a moral muscle. You can train it and you can strengthen it. Now, let me be really blunt when I say this, and it's somewhat controversial, but what I mean is you could be great, but you can always be better at being you, right? Now, that's a difficult thing to swallow, right? Because what do you mean I could be better at being me? Maybe I could be better at speaking. I could be better at thinking. I could be better at acting. But being better at being me, what does that mean? And what I would say is that your behavior, whether it's your cognitive behavior, your emotional behavior, your actual behavior, although actual behavior is a weird way of saying it, speaks to who you are and what you care about. So when you do those things well, it reinforces your identity. It brings you into the professional that you are becoming, and that moral muscle gets trained and gets strengthened, right? The second, and it's not even the second, it's just another way of saying this, your professional competence grows out of your personal profile, right? If I were to tell you that your professional competence is a list of things, is a list of things, is that you? It could be, right? But the key is not to say you are just a list of things, right? What you are is the person who works on their moral professional behavior muscle in order so that those actions reinforce your beliefs, your values, your goals into the identity that you have. We start professionalism education with you and where you're at, as opposed to where you need to be, right? So let me tell you how this plays out when I both teach, instructing in curriculum, as well as I advise or mentor in professionalism questions. So what I always do is I ask a ton of questions. And the reason why I ask a ton of questions goes back to I need to know where you are and what you're and who you are and where you want to go in order to understand how you can get there through both yourself and the professional expectations that you have. So if someone wants to do something or someone's presented with a situation, I'll ask, well, what do you want to do in this situation? Right? That speaks initially to either reactions, urges, fears, desires, and so forth. Right? The second thing I want to ask is, well, do you want to want that thing? Right? So now let me give you an example. I think I've given it before. Is let's say you're talking to a patient and it's lunchtime, and all you want to do is you want to leave. You want to go grab lunch. You're hungry, right? But you don't want to leave. What you really want is to be able to have the ability to restrain yourself, give attention to the patient, because you recognize that patient's vulnerable. And you recognize that patient's entrusting you in you and trusting the authority that you have to be able to provide care. Right? So you want to leave, but you don't want to leave. Right? So that speaks to higher order desires, but what it also speaks to is professional competencies. Right? Those professional competencies, or those expectations the profession has for you, become the things that you want for yourself. Right? So if I say, okay, well, what do you want to do? What does that tell you about yourself? Right? If you say, no, what I actually really want is to leave because I'm hungry, okay, then that should tell you something about yourself. If it tells you, no, like what I really want is to not want to leave, but want to stay and not be hungry, well, that tells me that I'm in a current situation of tension or struggle. Right? Do you want to be in that current type of struggle? No one really wants to have that type of struggle, right? Great, so now let's think about how you want to achieve your wants. Do you make sure you have snacks and eat before before you visit different patients? Do you know how to eat differently? Do you know how to work on your attention capacity? Like whatever it is, right? This is a different way of thinking about what you can do and how you fit professional competencies than saying, well, too bad I know you're hungry, but you have to put the patient over yourself first. Because if you notice in this situation, you're not putting yourself, you're not self-sacrificing for the sake of the patient. What you want and what the patient wants is the same. You want to stay. The patient wants you to stay, right? If you notice, even if this is about ethics and professionalism, none of these questions speak about shoulds or oughts. They all speak about wants. Why do you think that is? All right, I'll ask you a really simple question. If I tell you you should do something, how are you going to feel? I mean, if you're snarky, you might say, you can't tell me what to do. If you're not, you'll say, okay, I'll do it, but then write a really bad review of my teaching. But if I say, what do you want to do, then who's telling you what to do? Me or you? You're telling yourself what to do. And are you telling yourself to do based on external standards or internal desires or internal aspirations? Internal aspirations. And do they speak to my goals for you or your goals for yourself? Your goals for yourself, which means, are you complying with the tradition or the profession's expectations, or are you adopting them as your own? You're adopting them as your own. So what's easier to show an entrustable behavior or entrustable competency? Doing it because of a test or an assessment, or doing it because it speaks to who you are and what you care about? It speaks, let's hope it's because it speaks to who you are and what you care about. So let's go back to this case. Would this have been a better way of going through than the resident saying, well, just don't do anything that makes you uncomfortable? Would it have? Yes, it would have. Because it would have shown that the resident has a senior resident to talk to who's actually listening. It would show that the senior resident has the ability to understand that there are limitations here, and those limitations don't speak to you being a bad person, but you having a high barrier to carry, right? It speaks to the fact that like you have wants. I know some of the wants that you may have is not to have, what is it called, bad assessments or bad recommendations, right? You don't want to be self-sacrificial here, even when professionalism wants you to put patients' interests above your own, but not all of your interests, right? It's the lower order interests, not the higher order ones, because those are aligned, right? So how does it speak to purpose? So let me give you the definition that I use for purpose, because in giving that definition, I think it'll be really helpful to see as like an anchor to how this way of thinking about professionalism works. So the way I think about purpose is it's your self-defined long-term intention that is both meaningful to you and impactful for the world, right? Now, I use the term intention here really specifically because it's general. You have a general intention to do something that's going to change, right? Your intentions, and how you achieve them are going to grow through your various stages of life, but the importance of pursuing that intention won't. So, for example, it may be that an intention is I want to help people, but which people, when, for what reason do they need help, and how you can help them, right, will then determine how that intention turns into a goal. Right? So your purpose will guide your decisions, behaviors, and goals, but it'll also provide you a sense of direction, right? Because now when you say, well, I want to go into this specialty, right? Why? Because, I don't know, better quality of life, or it gets, people get paid well, or it comes with a free golf membership. I mean, I don't know if people play golf anymore, but you hear what I'm saying, right? Then you might be like, well, am I just bouncing around for whatever happens? Or no, because my general intention, my primary intention is to help people. And this gives me also other wants too, right? And it also helps you find meaning in life. The way I see the relationship between purpose and meaning is purpose is what you can put into life. It gives you the intentionality to put yourself into life. And meaning is what you extract out of life. But in any cliched statement, what you put in is what you get out. Right? So if you're intentional putting something in, you'll get the meaning out. If you are not intentional coming in, then the meaning that you may get out of it may not speak to the meaning that you could get out of it. Right? But this goes back to who am I? Who do I want to be? And what can I do to become that person? Now, on an organizational level, purpose is different than mission and values. Right? Mission speaks to what we do. Right? Value speaks to what we care about. Purpose speaks to why we do what we do. It's not vision. Vision is what we see in the future. Right? But it's why we do it. Why we love it. Why we're so invested in what we do. Right? That's the intention. So even when our mission may change, right, that intention stays the same. And when that organizational purpose is clear, and when that individual or professional purpose is clear, right, then you don't have that hidden curriculum problem anymore. Right? You could speak to shared intentions and values. Right? So this, again, I said in the beginning that purpose is really big, but you should develop a purpose mindset, that intentionality. So the purpose, developing a purpose mindset really is a set of skills. It's an awareness skill, knowing when you're facing that values-laden decision such that you can act purposefully. It's that analysis, both self-reflection and reflection of the situation to arrive at the decision that speaks to not only your and the profession's goals, but the beliefs and values too. And we're going to see how all that aligns. And action, meaning going back to that giving voice to values as a professional physician. It's not enough to know what to do. You need to know how to do it in a way that works for you, right? For example, telling the attending, sorry, that's just not how I work, might not be the best way to do it, right? But there are ways that you can do something differently, right? One of the things to always think about on this, how to do that works for you is, you may not be able to solve the problem, but if you can push the needle, that works, right? You don't have to see, I'm going to just talk in metaphors for a while. You don't have to see everything as a mountain that you have to climb. You could see each step along the way as a success as well, right? That's what it means to have a purposeful mindset, right? Ought implies can, cannot implies ought not. So don't try to achieve things that you can't, but what you can, if it speaks to your oughts, then go for it. Now, when you think about developing this purpose mindset, you really have to think about, like, what does it mean as an iterative process? You can't do this once, or you can't learn about it. Have any of you played games before? Anything from chess to soccer to highlight to wrestling. Right. So you notice how there's a difference between just getting familiar with the game, to drills, to practices, to season, to postseason, to championship. Okay? Like, how you get to a championship is that things become so habitual that you no longer have to think about it in the same way. Practice doesn't make perfect, it makes room for you to see what you can't see when you're only focused on the behavior itself, right? So when you want to think about your actions or your beliefs or your values, you really have to think about it in a habit formation kind of way. So this is from Mahatma Gandhi, but if I say it, then you can say it's from me. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. So another way of saying it becomes your destiny means it becomes your identity, right? But again, your values only become your identity when they become part of your habits. Your habits only become part of who you are, right, when you're deliberately doing your actions, right? Actions only become really like rote when it becomes just the way you talk. It's not foreign to you, right? And when things are able to just roll off your lips because it's just the way you talk, it means you've been thinking about it for a long time, right? So this habituation is not simply just thinking about entrustable capabilities because you've done it so many times, but you thinking about it. Like before you go into a room, you don't think only, well, I have to make sure that I get informed consent and I respect patient autonomy. It's, well, who is this person I'm talking to? What does it mean to respect a patient? Where is that patient? Where is that patient such that they're both deserving and will be getting respect, right? So all of this goes into a few words that I want to say about values. But so far, any questions so far? We're good? And remember, you can't ask them. You have to hold them till the end. So let me say a few things about values. So the first thing that if you notice that I've been talking about values, I keep saying it's things that you care about. Like oftentimes we'll see values on a wall or on a computer screen, and we think that we have to comply with those values, right? But when we have to comply to those values, then what does that do in terms of what we're thinking about professional identity formation? It's like, oh, if I want to be professional, I have to figure out how I do those things, right? I want to think about values in terms of values entailing choices, meaning not these are values I have to comply with, but these are values that I care about, which means I now have a choice to act on them as opposed to a choice or a demand to comply with them, right? And what this does, this empowering move, allows you to take control of your decisions. So this is an example that you probably have often in medicine, and I always love when a doctor comes to me and we talk about confidentiality. So let's say I am a relative of a patient, and the doctor comes to me and says, I just spoke to your relative. I said, great, tell me what happened. And they're like, no, I can't break confidentiality. I love when that happens, because now I'm like, great, challenge accepted. Let me see how I can get you to do what I want, because I know that you're not doing what you want, but you're doing what you think you have to do. Because really what I want to do is I want to take care of my relative. I want to know what's going on, not because I want a power trip, but because I'm going to be taking care of that person, right? Now, you saying that you can't break confidentiality is just an obstacle for me, right? If you say to me, I mean, you don't have to be like snarky about it, but like if you say something like these words, I'm not the type of person who breaks confidentiality, therefore I will not disclose this information, I have a totally different reaction. Because when someone says I can't, I will show them how they can. If someone says I won't, I will respect them. Right? But you see how that value as a choice versus that value as a restriction not only changes you, but changes me? You see how much more power your values have when they become yours? Right? So let me do one more thing about values, because this may sound easy, but there's a little bit more work to be done. So the second thing is when we think about values, we need to think about how to operationalize them. And when I say operationalize them, do you guys recognize this one? Please say yes. Okay, good. I heard a yes. I'm going with it. When I think about operationalized values, I want to think about three things. I want to think about the beliefs that they entail, the behaviors that they encompass, and what questions do they force me to ask when I'm making a decision, right? Because if they're just values, then I don't know what they mean. So I'll give you a great example. I actually really love this example. It's from the President's Commission on Bioethics under Obama, when they had the challenge of thinking about pediatric inoculation for anthrax or something like that. And there were a number of people who said, we cannot do research on children, right? There was another group that says, we have to do research on the children, right? Because they were worried about an anthrax scare. And what the commission realized was both of them were acting or advocating for completely opposite things, but they both shared the same value, right? Both of them shared the value of we need to protect the children. Those who did not want to do pediatric research said they're a vulnerable population. Who knows if we'll ever have an anthrax scare? We can't put them through that type of undue harm. Right? The people that were advocating for the research says, even if we don't know there's an anthrax, potential for an anthrax terrorism or whatever it was, the probability is high enough that we need to protect them in case there is one. Right? So if you notice, like sharing the value of we need to protect the children can be operationalized in completely different ways, knowing what your beliefs are, your assumptions are, what your behaviors are, and so forth. So if we have values and we articulate them through what does this mean in terms of what I believe about myself and what I believe about other people, and I'm only using respect here, not respectful compassion, but you can do the same thing with the compassion side, then you know, okay, respect means something to me because like there's certain concepts and beliefs that it assumes. It also means something in terms of the behaviors that demonstrate respect. So if you notice some of these behaviors, listening actively without interrupting or dismissing others, assuming best intent is a starting premise, acknowledging different viewpoints without resorting to hostility. If I just gave you those behaviors and said, here's a respect competency, we'd be having the same challenge with the professionalism competency. You'd be like, okay, well, like, what does this mean? Where does it come from? How do I do it? But if you know that they're tied to certain beliefs about yourself and other people, then you're like, oh, of course. Listening actively without interrupting or dismissing, both it shows like how I see myself and how I see others. The behavior is now a communicative act. It communicates what you care about, right? And then the same thing with regards to the essential questions. If these values speak to what you care about and you're making decisions, then you would ask, is this demonstrating respect or is this demonstrating disrespect in terms of what my beliefs are of what respect entails and what values or behaviors this value of respect entails, right? So that's how you operationalize these values. But, there's always a but. It's so complicated. With regards to professionalism, we have a number of different values that come into tension, especially in the organizational level. Right? So we have professionalism values and we have corporate values, right? And if you notice, the case that I gave in terms of the extra coding for the sake of higher billing spoke to profitability or financial stability and so forth, which went against a professional value, right? Now, oftentimes when I speak to clinicians, professional values are seen as what needs to be saved, and corporate values are an obstacle. When I speak to hospital leadership, they say, no, professional values, like that's what professionals need, but we can't not think about corporate values because we have to think about institutional sustainability. We have to think about metrics in order to understand if these values are operationalized well. We have to think about innovation and technology, not only because that's what society expects of us and what business expects of us, but it speaks to being able to serve our patients better, right? So the challenge here on professionalism is not, well, which one do you choose against the other? But it's actually recognizing what Isaiah Berlin calls value pluralism, which basically means that you can't really reduce values into a single value system. Sometimes they're going to be in tension. But when they're in tension, that doesn't mean the decision isn't understandable. It means that they're just incommensurable, right? So there are some times that certain values might be prioritized over other ones, and it's not a zero-sum game or a dismissal. It's just a recognition of a complex situation, right? So professionalism can incorporate personal values, and it can also incorporate corporate values, but in a way of recognizing the complexity of what healthcare looks like today, right? If you do that, then professionalism isn't at odds with other needs in healthcare. And more importantly, professionalism can then benefit other areas or other aspects of healthcare because it shows not only the ability to make certain values one's own, but how to have a tradition of values given new situations, right? But it demands communication and transparency, because if there is a vagueness or a lack of clarity on purpose and general intention in healthcare, then you have vagueness in terms of ambiguity and values-laden decision-making. The case that I keep bringing up with the residents and the attending. Sometimes you might have overemphasis on efficiency and metrics, because sometimes what you can measure is what you shoot for. And professionalism metrics are just they're difficult. Like we started this talk in terms of how do you measure affect? How do you measure motivation, right? And sometimes you'll have top-down or seemingly arbitrary mandates, but that speaks to any time when there's an issue of lack of clarity or ambiguity in terms of what the values are and what the values that are being acted upon, or what the professionalism competency is, but without understanding what the beliefs that they entail, right? So this is all to say that professionalism is a wonderful competency when seen as a competency to speak to a professional identity. And that professional identity is not only speaks to the profession itself, but how the profession works, and each individual therefore also works, given who they are and in the context or in the organizational environment in which they're working, right? What different values look like will speak to the beliefs that they entail and the behaviors that are appropriate, and how those get intrinsically motivated to act upon speak to how you bringing yourself into this education, and how that is being reinforced not only in your explicit curriculum, but also in your extracurricular activities, as well as in the culture or the hidden curriculum.
Wow, that was jam-packed, wasn't it? Well, and obviously you have a passion for the purpose-oriented mindset and professionalism. Dr. Bedzow, thank you so much for being here. And I'm Dr. Pepper Brown. I chair the Health System Foundation. And again, I want to thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. Obviously, you're very passionate about this, and we thank you for doing that here locally and across the nation as well. Dr. Dalzell pointed this out earlier. Again, this is Dr. Henry Jennings' lectureship, and is made possible by the generous donation by his children. It's Dr. Hank and Polly Jennings, who are in Nashville, and I think they're online now watching this, and also the Reverend Dr. Betsy Jennings Powell, and the Reverend David Powell as well. Thank you very much for your transformative gift that has allowed us to have this lectureship here. We're honored that you would do this for us. And again, if you look on the back of your program, this is the Henry Jennings Jr. Lectureship. And Dr. Jennings, most of you I know did not know him, but I did personally. What a fine gentleman he was. He was a consummate gentleman physician, and he was a mentor to many residents and physicians alike. And his legacy of mentoring physicians continues on today because of this lectureship. And again, I thank everybody for being here and supporting this lectureship. And again, Dr. Bedzow, thank you very much for being here. And I think that will conclude tonight's program. Okay.